Hey, Beach Church. It's that time again for another tidbit from Liz with our favorite, nerdy nuggets. Actually, I try not to, but I just can't help myself. Anyway, today we're going to dive into the book of Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians, all three chapters, but we're not going to do it like a classroom. We're going to do this like a heart to heart and kind of like having a talk, like what does this stir inside me kind of talk? Yeah, that. Um, so if you've been journeying with me for the last couple of tidbits, we went through Acts 7-9, watching Saul become Paul. And then we were in First Corinthians, where we talked about love and liberty and the long game. And now we get to see what that same transformed Paul says to the church that is confused, scared, tired, and trying to survive a noisy world. Kind of like anybody you know? Definitely sounds like somebody I know. Yeah, that's like me. Absolutely me. And probably you too. Anyway, so chapter 1. I kind of gave this the title of Encouragement in Affliction. And we're going to kind of break that chapter down. But before we read Paul's tone, we got to know the setting, right? So the nerdy nugget here is I can never say it right. Thessalonica. There it is. Thessalonica was the capital of Macedonia. And it was a huge port city full of Rome's influence and idols and trades with different religions and soldiers and like chaos everywhere. Christians there in Thessalonica were a tiny minority, but even more, they were being persecuted and lied to about Jesus's return. Some people were saying, "You missed it. The day of the Lord has already happened." So I kind of wanted you to see this nerdy nugget here. If you can imagine their anxiety, like this is fresh, it's a new religion, and they feel like they missed the boat. And then here comes Paul, not scolding, but comforting. Chapter 1 basically is Paul walking in the door and he's saying, "I see you. I see your suffering. I see how tired you are. And God sees it too." And then he tells them that your perseverance is evidence of God's work inside you. God is not unjust. He sees the pressure that you're under, the anxiety that you feel, and that you are growing in faith and love, even under fire, even under that pressure. So here I said, let's pause and talk a little. So thinking about that, there's an introspective moment here you can have. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything you could, everything right, and still life just kept pressing on you and you just couldn't get out from under? Like, Lord, I am trying so hard. Why does it still hurt? Why isn't this easier? Or why haven't things changed yet? Paul says to them and to us in this absolutely beautiful chapter that growth under pressure is still growth. And so I wanted to reflect that to you, because faith in the fire is still faith. God sees more than your pain. He sees your endurance. He sees the trial and he sees you pressing through it. So that's chapter 1. Encouragement, there's validation, and reminding you that your suffering does not disqualify your faith. It often strengthens it. I often think about in my despair, I have this beautiful anecdote for it, and the anecdote for despair is humility. If I am in this moment of despair, I humble myself. And instead of feeling isolated, I find solitude with God as I press in. So then there's chapter 2, right? And so I titled this one, Don't Be Shaken. Now, chapter 2, this is where it gets a little spicy because Paul's about to give the smackdown. He addresses the confusion. And so the nerdy nugget here that I wanted to give you were people were circulating forged letters claiming to be from Paul, fake prophecy, fake teaching, saying Jesus already returned, and that these sinners were like left behind, like the old Kirk Cameron series. If anybody's like old school, you'll get that one. Anyway, imagine being a new believer, right? And then hearing that you didn't do everything right. And so you were left behind, in these letters from this apostle, Paul, this prophet, are saying these things when it's all false. So Paul says to them, don't be easily unsettled or alarmed. So I want you to hear that, right? As slowly as I can say it. Do not be easily shaken. It's very simple. Do not be easily shaken. So let's just breathe right there. Because when your anxiety is there and your fear is there and you're overwhelmed, don't be shaken in that moment. Pause. And breathe. Paul explains the day of the Lord has not come, and he gives signs not to create fear, but to recenter their minds so that they stop chasing these rumors. And it is imperative that you get that reminder, because fear will come and tell you something's true, right? False evidence appearing real. FEAR. I know everyone knows this acronym by now, but God has called you. God chose you. God comforts your heart and strengthens you. And this is what Paul reminds them in that moment, right? So let's be real. We all have things that shake us. Some are traumatic from our past that are repressed, right? And some are just everyday moments, like you might get a startling text message, or someone's silence to you, or a diagnosis, or a bill, or a person's opinion, a fear that wakes you up at 3 a.m., a memory that still rattles you to this day, from things you experienced when you were younger. So Paul's message is not theological trivia, okay? It's pastoral care. And I think it's imperative that we see that he's basically saying, don't be moved so quickly by fear. Don't let anxiety rewrite your identity. And remember who called you out of the darkness into the light. So let's connect that to Acts and Corinthians for a moment. In Acts 7:9, I was teaching you about Saul. He was a man driven by fear, intensity, and certainty that turned violent, right? So, but once Jesus met him on the road to Damascus, his entire world, inner world first, was reordered. And then the external world started to change. Think about that. And then in Corinthians, Paul taught us about the long game, love, liberty, and learning how to live in the tension, right? So now in 2 Thessalonians, he's saying, don't let anxiety lead you. Let truth steady you. Because the fear, that false evidence appearing real, they're contracts with the enemy from the past, or somewhere a fear in the future, but absolutely not the truth. So you let chapter 2 anchor you in the fact that you don't have to be tossed around. You can stand firm. And I really felt like that was a key to it, the entire piece right there. So then we're going to move to chapter 3, right? And this one I named A Warning, a Rhythm, and a Blessing. And chapter 3 is absolutely, it feels like Paul's sitting on my couch, right? And he's saying, okay, y'all, let's talk practically. This is how this man is. Like, legit, this dude. He's my guy. Anyway, 3 big things happen here. And I think it's really important that you get them in the right order. So chapter 3 starts with number 1, a request. You hear Paul right out the gate saying, pray for us that the message of the Lord, right, spreads. Even Paul, this prophet, even Paul, this apostle, even Paul, this pastor, right? He's a 5-fold ministry, and even Paul needed prayer. And so even leaders need covering, and even leaders have fear, and even leaders struggle with anxieties and trauma wounds from the past that need to be uncovered. And there is no shame in that. In fact, the enemy attacks those that are leading others, which is what a pastor is, right? So anyone in church or in any sort of authority in a business or over a family, even over your life, you're your own leader, but God is the true leader. So then Paul gives a correction to this. And here's the next nerdy nugget on this one. I thought, okay, some Thessalonians, right, stopped working because they believed that the end was near. I find that hilarious, to be honest with you, but whatever. So they literally quit life, quit jobs, and expected the church to support them. They were living off the church. They were fully living off the church, abusing that and taking it for granted. And Paul says very, very clearly that it's this famous phrase for many Christians. I know you have heard this, but if a man will not work, he shall not eat. So asking and begging and borrowing for bread when you're not willing to work is not going to get your house fed. And that's what God is saying there. But he's not being harsh through Paul here. He's redirecting disorder, because when you're doing that, you're manipulating or taking for granted someone, you're out of order. So Paul is saying, don't abandon your responsibilities just because you're waiting on God to do this miracle. And it's very clear that sometimes we're asking God for something over here, but we're not willing to do this over here. That's the whole synopsis there. So that God's timing doesn't erase daily life. Spiritual expectation does not replace earthly stewardship. And that's not just in money and thought and time. These are all forms of stewardship and tithe. So then the third note, it's a blessing. Paul ends with this beautiful quote. He says, may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times in every way. Every infinite statement. At all times, infinite statement. And in every way. Not when circumstances line up, right? Not when people cooperate. Not when emotions will behave with you or, not give you a panic attack or some anxiety throughout the evening or day for no reason at all, it would seem. Peace is not the result of conditions. It's the presence of Christ in you. So that's chapter 3. So I kind of go through all of these this way to close with saying, standing firm in a shaking world around you. And I thought, so, when you look at all 3 of these chapters, here's the heart of 2 Thessalonians. Chapter 1, God sees your struggle. You are growing even when life presses you, even when you're having panic. Chapter 2 is don't be shaken by fear and remember who you are, who you were called to be. And chapter 3 is live faithfully while you wait. Peace is your portion. Acts told us transformation is possible. Corinthians told us love is the long game. And Thessalonians tells us that the stability in the soul is possible even in the most unstable seasons, like a holiday season. So imagine that, emotions are always high and stress is always high at this time of year. And I want you to ask yourself, even now, what shakes you and what would it look like to stand firm instead of react, to hold a boundary, to address the fear? Where do you need peace or clarity, courage, stability? Those are good questions. I always feel the heart of God when I ask questions like that because I can feel him speaking to me. So let this letter, because that's what it is, a love letter, be a reminder to you that God has not forgotten you. God has not forgotten you. God is not too late. He's never late. He's always on time. And that God is not silent. You can stand firm even here, even now, even in the exhaustion with the fear and the struggle. Anyhow, it's another tidbit from Liz, guys, with the nerdy nuggets and the heart check like usual, just your encouragement for the week. I miss you all, Beach Church. And I wish you all Merry, 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 Merry Christmas. I'm pretty sure I'll do another one in the new year, probably. Yeah, because they're every 2 weeks.